in rugby we're going through a huge issue at the minute. There's lawsuits, people suing different unions, people suing the federation at the top, World Rugby, from historic games and seasons and clubs that they played at, because concussion was never a thing. It's almost like the elephant in the room. One thing I chat about, and when I've interviewed people, and I've had a Dr. Bill Ribbons who's leading up the concussion stuff in rugby, chatting to people from NFL, and I probably shouldn't do it or have done it, but I always brought it back to boxing. So as an athlete myself, playing rugby, I knew that it was a dangerous sport. So I'd go in, I'd be like, well, yeah, my mates would be getting knocked out around me. I'd be like, well, that ain't safe, is it? You can see that. And then when it came to signing, I retired at 34. I know you retired earlier, but I made the decision not to carry on because I was like, I'm fucked. The likelihood is I'm going to get hurt now, so if I carry on. But as a young man, I knew what I was signing up for, a contact sport that was very dangerous, and that's why I liked it. And I spoke about boxing all the time when I was chatting about it, because I was like, it's similar to boxing. But then I was thinking, actually, you can see boxing's dangerous. They sensationalise the knockouts. That's what sells the sport. But you have a long period. So it's interesting, the sparring. It's an obvious thing, right? If you're sparring every week, you're going to be taking micro concussions. Is it spoken about, so at the very top end, about protect? Because you're not going to protect yourself, are you? Because if you come from a council estate and you're working on a building site, like, you want to go out on your sword. You hear this the whole time. Let me go out on my sword. I'm a young man. So you need to be protected from yourself. We spoke about the referees, but what about the powers that be? Is it something that's spoken about, or is it just what it is because boxing is about knocking the other person out?
I think we want, on fight night, we want knockouts, but we want healthy fighters after. It's not good for the sport if that's not the case, and that's not really, no one is interested in that. There's a lot of education provided by the British Boxing Board of Control for trainers to understand that come away from that old school mentality, of just like, excessive sparring plays its toll and stuff like that. You have regular weight checks in boxing now to make sure that you're basically not crashing the weight come fight night, but that's not ideal, to be honest, because they should figure out more of like a rehydration test, because what they're doing is they're making fighters get within their fighting weight, maybe 30 days out, 14 days out, 5 days out, 3 days out, 1 day out. You got fighters now just manipulating the scales with their hydration levels throughout camp. So again, if I'm a fighter and I've got to weigh in at 76.2 kilos, I've got to weigh in at 12 stone, 168 pound, and they say to me, right, you got to be 10% within 2 weeks of the fight, that makes perfect sense. But if I haven't quite got to that 10%, or 8% or 6%, 5%, I can't remember what the statistics were, I go, right, well, I'm going to have to get in the morning, black bag on, skip off, do my check weigh, and then guess what? I'm sparring that afternoon. I can't put this sparring off. So I'm sparring dehydrated. My brain has shrunk because it's got enough fluid. The tendons that hold my brain to my skull are now stretched. There's much more likeliness that I'm going to have an injury today. But on paper, the board have done the right thing. They've done the safe thing, or the WBC or the IBF or whoever the governing body is or something. So it's tough, because if you start doing just hydration tests, you can fuck boxing up, because there's going to be a lot of fighters who can't make the weight they're supposed to make, because that's just how it is. But
that's on the athlete then, isn't it?
But
so that's solely on the individual, the boxer.
Yeah. And what we signed up for, like you said earlier, that's what I signed up for. I knew terrible things. But one of the earliest fights I can remember is Nigel Benn versus Gerald McLennan. It's one of my favourite fighters to watch, like, not just the ability, but to watch the heart and the bravery of Ben and of McLennan. But I'd rather have that fight not taken place, because Gerald McLennan's seriously ill. Like, he almost died. He'd never be the same again. So something went wrong in that fight. Maybe it went wrong in the camp. Who knows, And I think people's awareness has moved on a lot since then. I worked at the tail end of my career with Shane McGuigan, who is a phenomenal boxing coach. His dad, Barry, of course, former world champion. He's boxing stock. and he understands it. He's back, he's got his best fighter's interest at heart, and if there's a fighter that he's got that's not quite up to scratch, then he's strong enough in mind to say, right, we're not going through with this fight, or you need to have time off, or this sparring is not going to happen today, because fighters, as you say, will always need protecting from themselves, and I think most athletes will be the same in any way, because whether you're from humble backgrounds or not, like, the sole purpose of sport is winning. If it's not about winning, then what's it about? And it can feel like winning at all costs at times. So, yeah, there's definitely huge periods in my career where I would need saving, and I was more than willing to die for the cause. You grow up a bit and you have kids and you get responsibilities and stuff like that, and that does change. And that's the reason I retired at 30, with hopefully health on my side, to be more present in my sort of my personal life now. So it's part of sport, but boxing, maybe rugby, and others in particular, they're dangerous contact sports. You gotta, I don't know, you might need saving.